Hi, my name is Pam Baker, and today we're going to be talking about characteristics of autism. Autism is characterized by a variety of markers which may not be seen in every individual, and the severity of each marker will be different. We'll begin by talking about cognitive characteristics. Cognitive characteristics include both social and communicational deficits that may be seen in a person with autism. Joint attention is one of these characteristics, and that's when two people focus on an object by getting attention through a point, eye gaze, or a verbal connection. People with autism have trouble with joint attention. Theory of mind is another cognitive characteristic. This is when a person cannot understand that other people in their worlds have different ideas, thoughts, and beliefs, and they become angry when someone does not agree or believe what they do or follow what they've designed, and they can't understand why a person wouldn't do that. I have a student who has trouble with theory of mind. He designs games and makes very intricate rules, and they're very rigid, and he cannot understand when people want to change the rules or have their own ideas on it, and he becomes upset when they don't want to play because he's so rigid and refuses to be able to make changes to include them in his play. Cognitive inflexibility is another characteristic. This is when a person is very rigid and stuck in routines, and when those routines are interrupted, they become very upset and have to build coping skills to be able to deal with upset changes. I had a student once who was very inflexible when it came to routines and schedules, and we had to build a step-by-step schedule for him for the day, and each thing that was going to happen was delineated in the schedule, and he was also able to make changes in the schedule to see what he wanted to do first. And if something was going to be upside down that day, like a special visitor or an assembly, then we would put an upside down smiley face so that he would know there was going to be a change in his schedule for that day, and that helped him cope with his with the changes. There are also neurological characteristics in autism, and those can be very different in each individual, and the severity will be also different, either mild or severe. Some neurological characteristics include seizures, ADHD, sensory issues, repetitive behaviors, self-injurious behaviors, language disorders, and more. Some of my students with autism disorders also have ADHD, and they have a difficult time sitting down or being in one place. So we've got bubble seats for him or them to sit down with, and made little hula hoops that they could run and jump in, and have fidgets so that their hands could be moving when they're trying to pay attention to teachers and peers. One of my students has sensory issues surrounded by hearing, and he cannot screen out all the noises and sounds around him, and becomes anxious when things are too loud or too many people are talking around him. So we got him some headphones that can silence some of that sound for him, and he can concentrate better when he's wearing those. When a student of mine had very little language, could not speak or make his needs and wants met, we started using the PECS program with him, the Picture Exchange Communication System, and he was able to use pictures to build words for his needs and wants and grow those into sentences and be able to communicate with staff and peers. When diagnosing students with autism, you have to look at characteristics, signs, and symptoms in the areas of behavioral, social, communication, and sensory. Some communication characteristics include delayed speech and language, difficulty initiating conversations, repetitive language that may be from movies or music or TV shows, echolalia, where they repeat what you said instead of responding to the question or statement that you made. They may take what you say literally instead of figuratively, so they don't really understand all the fluff that goes around language. They just understand what you said in a very literal context. Jokes are hard for them to understand at times too. Students may have social characteristics as well. This is where maybe they don't understand nonverbal cues like eye gaze and gestures and facial expressions. They may have difficult time making friendships or keeping friendships because of their behaviors are rigid and their theory of mind is not developed. They have a difficult time taking turns in both play and conversation. They may be inflexible with play and only play in one way, and that's harder for people to be able to join them. People with autism may have a hard time with regulating their emotions. They may get over-emotional or under-emotional, depending on the circumstance, and that may be hard for the people around them to understand their emotional response. I had 2 students who showed characteristics of autism with social interactions. One of them thought that he had lots and lots of friends, and because of the way he treated people, being angry and not controlling his emotions, he did not have a lot of friends that played with him. The second one was very liked by other people, but he did not feel that way. He felt that he didn't have any friends, and he felt lonely all the time. People with autism may have sensory characteristics that they display. They may be hypersensitive, hyposensitive, or have mixed sensitivities to the senses, such as touch, hearing, sight, smell, and taste. If a person with autism has sensory issues with touch, they may be oversensitive to touch, like textures or tags or the clothing that they wear may bother them, or they may be undersensitive and not be able to feel a lot of sensitivities through touch. Sometimes sensitivities to taste is heightened, and that they will want to taste everything, even things that aren't food, or they may have aversion to taste and not want to taste many things at all. They may have a very limited palate, and they may not like textures in their mouth. Some sensitivities may include visual sensitivities. This is where maybe bright light bothers them, and sunglasses could be used to help that. Or maybe they stare at objects for long periods of time. One strategy I use in my classroom is blue shades across my fluorescent lights, and it dims the light in the classroom and helps students with those visual sensitivities to feel more calm when the lighting is a little more blue. Some students may have sensitivity to smell, and some of them may want to smell everything, your shirt, your arms, or foods, or anything to get that sensory feeling. Others don't like smells, and they will be very loud and letting you know that smell has bothered them. Some students may have high sensitivity to noise, and loud noises or lots of different noises aren't able to be screened out. And others will focus on just one sound and just focus on that sound, and you'll hear about just that sound when they're hearing it. One way that we use to help students with this is noise blocking headphones. Movement is another area of sensory issues for people with autism. They may have poor muscle control, poor muscle tone, maybe poor motor planning. They might be toe walking or gaining some type of sensory input by different movements that they make. Another area of characteristics of autism include behavioral characteristics. Individuals with autism may be preoccupied with topics or activities or movies or things like that, and they become obsessive about them, using the movements in their play or continually talking about them and just focusing on them instead of other things in their life. They may replay video games or movies and act out those scenes for long periods of time. People with autism may have repetitive behaviors like flapping or flicking their fingers in front of their eyes, lining up toys instead of playing with them, rocking, things like that can stimulate them and soothe them. Other behavioral characteristics include rituals, where people with autism perform the same rituals over and over again. They stick to schedules very rigidly, and they like things to be done the same way all the time, even if it doesn't work. I have a student in my class who replays movie scenes, and his body is always in action, playing out Spider-Man. And we try to give him time when he can do that so that he can play that and remind him to do that at recess or at other times when it's appropriate for him to be moving like that. Other people with autism have a hard time dealing with change and transitions. So when things are happening the same way every day, and then something changes. For instance, they become a bus rider or a pickup person by with their parents that sets them in a outburst or a meltdown. One of my students asks almost every day if he is gate 1 or a bus rider, and if you give him the wrong answer that day, it could result in a meltdown. Even though he understands that he's a bus rider every single day until Friday, the anxiety of wondering when that change is going to happen is very difficult for him. Disruption in rituals and repetitive behaviors and movements can cause students to become upset, anxious, and cause meltdowns or aggressive behaviors. It can also cause self-injurious behaviors. And these behaviors may look like hitting himself or pounding his head on something, things that they do to hurt themselves when things aren't going exactly the way he wants them to. Thanks for tuning in to my video on autism characteristics. I hope that this has been helpful, and thank you again for listening.